you had the Promise Ring, you had Citizen King, you had this band Bender and the Buzzhorn, and all of these bands got signed to Atlantic. And, it was the funniest thing. It's like my timing was, well, that's my timing. It's exactly what it's.
Our podcast is all about you and your journey in music, how you got to where you are now. And of course, we'll talk about the new Big Mother gig record as well.
Cool. Let me just close this window because it's a little noisy.
No problem.
Yeah, I was kind of perusing your site. You've got to be just like, you're doing how many of these?
A lot.
A lot. Like, aren't you running out of things to talk to people?
No, because all I talk about is their life. So it's very easy for me on my end. I just am fascinated with, people and biographies and autobiographies. It's always just been something I've been fascinated with. And I've been in radio for 16 years. So kind of trying to figure out a way to mix the two, and my love of music and love of that. So it's fascinating to me. I love hearing about people's journeys. So I'd love to hear yours.
Yeah. Well, where do we start?
Talk to me about where were you born and raised?
I was born in Chicago, but when I turned 3, my folks moved up to Madison, Wisconsin. So I spent my whole life, grew up in the same house in Madison, went to elementary school and then high school in Madison. And then I went to Milwaukee for college at Marquette University.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I didn't know if you're going to keep going.
I don't know. Like there's
no. So I'm curious now, how did you get into music?
Well, I always loved music as a kid. I have these memories of like my father and my mom having this turntable with not many options, but I remember, they had Johnny Cash records and Henry Mancini and like Glenn Mathis and all of that kind of stuff. And so I always liked music, but I didn't sort of connect with it other than as a fun thing. I didn't connect with it emotionally really until probably high school or maybe 8th grade or so. I remember some friends telling me about, bands like the Sex Pistols and the Clash. And then suddenly it became this thing that was a little off the mainstream. It wasn't the Madonna song that was on the radio. It was, Discovering the Dead Milkmen or whatever. So in high school, I started really getting into music, making mixtapes, between all our friends. We would go down to the local record store and we'd all walk in and we'd each buy, 1 or 2 records, and then we would just pass them around back and forth between each other. So we were listening to everything from like new wave and alternative and punk and, kind of stuff like that. And I played piano as a kid. I picked up piano pretty early from what I'm told, like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old. I started taking piano and excuse me, came to it pretty naturally. So I played piano all growing up. Somewhere in middle school, I played drums in like the marching band.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did you just start on like snare, or did your parents buy you a kit? Like how did that start?
So we had a school band, and you were a percussionist, so like sometimes you'd have just the giant bass drum that you'd be standing there holding and hitting it. Sometimes you would get the snare. The snare was always the fun one. Everyone wanted the snare, but,
right.
And then sometimes you'd have those giant cymbals where you'd go this,
That must be a fun one too, though, because you get to make the most noise.
It is very noisy. The thing I remember though is you only play it like once or twice a song.
That's true. You got to carry them around for quite a bit.
You're standing there a long time just holding these 2 cymbals. Yeah. And then my grandfather had played the mandolin. He was this Chicago working class Italian guy who just loved playing mandolin. And he passed away, and he, through some sort of chain of command, the mandolin wound up with me. And so, so I started playing the mandolin first in terms of stringed instruments. It was the first thing I learned before I learned guitar. And then I went to college, and then it was like, okay, it's time to get real about music. So I got an acoustic guitar and started writing and recording, and you
didn't start writing music until you were in college? Is that like, what made you decide like, hey, I want to, get a guitar and kind of take this more seriously?
I don't know. I mean, I did some writing in high school, but they weren't, I wouldn't say they were anything fully formed. It was more just kind of like trying to sound like other people. Like I remember I wrote this song where I was like, well, how did New Order make Bizarre Love Triangle? And I just remember kind of like making a different sort of take on that sound using a Casio keyboard. When I got to college, it's a really good question, because I knew immediately I wanted to start recording songs. And I had this I was very cheap. So it's not that I didn't have money, I had money to eat and stuff, but I just didn't like spending money. So I had like a tape deck, a clock radio with a cassette deck in it. And then I had a boombox. Okay. And so I would take my Casio and I would, do some drums and some bass lines and record them into one tape, put that tape into the boombox, and then grab my guitar and then hit play and turn it up as loud as I could, and then sing along with it, and then record that. So doing like sort of like pretend
your own four track. Yeah. That's awesome.
It all sounded awful, but but I could get the ideas down. That's really what it was about.
Sure. So you started writing songs or obviously recording them that way. Is that kind of the beginning of what became Big Mother Gig, or like actually
it is.
First band you really started?
Yeah, so I recorded like 4 or 5 albums worth of these songs that I kind of just described to you. Yeah, well, I was, I wouldn't say that any of them are worth revisiting. They're really just kind of like, experiments. It's like, I just discovered Toad the Wet Sprocket. So what would a song like theirs sound like, and stuff. And then a lot of them were kind of joke songs too, about my friends and stuff. But there were a few songs that I then got a couple people together and we started playing those songs in a basement, and that did eventually become Big Mother Gig.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And when that band started, what was the beginning like? Were you trying to find shows around the college area, or how did the band really kind of get going?
Yeah, I mean, it's very like stumbling forward. The guy who lived in the dorm room next to me played guitar better than I did, and so I said, let's start playing together. So first it was just me and him, and we did some open mics at the union, like the student union. And then we found a bass player, and then we eventually found a drummer, and then there was a lot of coming and going until we finally sort of solidified on this unit, this 4-piece band. And we came up with the name, and then we were just playing basically like house parties, like we had maybe 5 originals and then a lot of covers. I mean, this was in the 90s. So we were playing like Pearl Jam and Nirvana songs and Stone Temple Pilot, or Screaming Trees, all of that stuff. We did Jane's Addiction. Like it was, we were a party band basically. And then about a year into that, I think it was probably my senior year of college at that point, it felt like we had more originals than covers. And then we started to record those originals, and then we started to play out in the clubs instead of just the local, school hangouts.
And what were those first shows like? I'm curious to know, like, was it terrifying to kind of going on stage, like from your, recording 4-track days to now you're playing in front of peers of yours, especially on an open mic night? Was that, you remember those, like, was that pretty terrifying? Like, tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd always been relatively comfortable being on a stage in front of people. I don't know why. It just never, I was in plays in high school and stuff, and I never really felt terribly nervous up, standing in front of a room full of people.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know I have a recording of that first open mic, and
Oh, you do?
I do, and
Wow.
it's yeah, just a cassette recording, and it's funny because I often use humor to deflect any potential criticism, like you can hear me laughing in the middle of songs, you can making, Bill Clinton jokes, like
Oh man.
just, doing anything I can to make anyone think, don't take this too serious. Like, we know we're not that good. So, but we know that, like it was kind of almost a certain amount, certain parts of it were almost a joke,
like self-deprecating type things.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And that's amazing that you have that tape. That's so cool.
Yeah, we went through like a kind of a so Big Mother Gig broke up in 1996.
Yeah.
We were gone for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then we decided, somewhere around, I don't know, 2014 or 2015, I just wanted to collect all of the ephemera in the world around this band. So started reaching out to everybody, people I hadn't talked to in 15, 20 years, and everyone had something, the old bassist had a couple videos, and then the guitar player had this cassette, and so we just kind of gathered it all together. So I actually have a lot of documentation from those early years.
Mm-hmm.
And we just kind of shared it internally, and shared it with some friends. None of it is, I think, makes us the best. It doesn't show us in the best light, perhaps, but it was it's interesting historical artifact.
Sure. With you put out the record My Social Commentary in 93. Was that like at that point when you put the album out, you said you were like a senior year of college when the band kind of formed? Was that record put out in, like, were you guys like, was it like you finished college and you decided, I want to pursue music full time? Like, what was the moment that you kind of started pursuing that? And tell me about that record coming out as well.
Yeah. So we recorded that record and it came out. That was my senior year when that album came out.
Oh, it was. Okay.
Yeah. So it was our attempt at being a real band and not just a party band. We kind of knew at that point, at least I knew, that this was something that I was going to continue doing after we graduated, because my graduation date was 94, and the founding guitarist, this guy Rob, he was also graduating in 94. So, well, we kind of knew there was like maybe not a deadline, but there was something coming up that I knew I wanted to keep going after that. Mm-hmm. And what ended up happening is, like, one by one, as everyone graduated and moved into their lives, like, they would sort of pull back from the band, and then they would get replaced by other musicians in the scene. And so by 95, it's a completely different lineup than it was in 94. I was the only probably consistent member at that point.
Okay.
And then it was like, okay, this is doing something. We were getting some local press. We were getting on better shows. We were starting to open for some touring acts. We got a manager. Things were looking pretty good. We went in and recorded Smiling Politely, which was the record that came out in 96. We recorded it in late 95, early 96. Yeah.
Okay. And once that album came out, did you tour more? Like, was the focus more on trying to make this band happen? But that was the last record you guys did, and then it was 20 years to the next one. Like,
yeah, it's a really classic rock and roll cliche. Like, we broke up the night we released the album was our last show.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it was all by design in a way. We finished the record. We all felt really good about it. And then, I don't know, I take full responsibility for, at that point, Big Mother Gig was 3.5, 4 years old. And I just kind of felt like we were spinning our wheels. And I wanted to move the band to New York City. And so, and for a while there, I had all 3 other members committed, and we were all going to move to New York. And then one by one, they all kind of, wised up a little bit and decided, maybe not. So by like August of that year, it was like, okay, they're not coming to New York, but I still am. And so I kind of decided, like, let's just put this record out. Let's play one last big show. And then that's the end of it. I'll see you guys later. And then we played this big show in Milwaukee. We had like 10 opening bands. We were kind of well liked in the scene. Like, we were friends with all the other bands. So we asked everyone to open. Everyone played 3 or 4 songs. And,
that's cool. So it's like more of like a big show with more like a festival-ish.
It was like a festival in a tiny rock club, it was like hilarious. And then a couple of days later, we actually still had one show that we committed to, which was this like ASCAP Ticketmaster Battle of the Bands thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we drove to Madison and played that. And, I guess Dave Perner was there from Soul Asylum.
Yeah. Wow.
He was like one of the judges or something. And so we, we were still kind of holding out that maybe at that show, someone would present us with a record contract, but that didn't quite happen. So I moved to New York, and that was the end of it.
So if you guys would have won the Battle of the Bands, would it have been a different trajectory for the that's interesting to think about.
It is interesting to think about. It would have at least caused me to seriously reconsider. I don't know that I would have, I guess it would have depended on what the real result was.
Okay.
Because we got some good feedback. There were some record label people there. I remember our manager said that at the time they were CBS Records was.
Oh, right.
Said some nice things about us and got our information. And I was like, okay, well, keep me posted. I got to pack. And I guess it never went anywhere.
Yeah. Well, what did you go to college for, if you don't mind me asking?
I studied communications.
Oh, that's what I did.
Yeah. I actually studied broadcasting. I was
really?
I was I worked at the radio station. I had my own, daily show, the morning show.
Wow.
And,
mornings.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, me and my friend Aaron, we attempted to do like a morning zoo show on a college radio station. It was just, I'm sure we offended everybody walking in the halls of that.
Well, that's the point, right? That's cool. Well, then what did you move to New York with a job in mind, or was it like, I'm going to move there to really pursue
it was
that's the spot?
Yeah, it was a trip out of love, I will say. My girlfriend at the time, and I just sort of decided, let's just do it. Let's get out of Wisconsin. We, packed everything we owned, a couple $100 in our pocket, and we just drove to New York City. And it's the kind of thing you do when you're, 22 years old.
Right.
And you've got nothing, to hold you down. So we had no jobs. We had an apartment that we had found, and we moved in, and that was that. And then we just started a whole new life. And it was like, okay, we got to get jobs, and we're both just kind of doing whatever we could to pay the bills. And and we ended up actually moving to the Hoboken area. That's where we kind of put our foot in, put our feet down.
And was like, how quickly after you moved to New York did you form Burnside Project?
Yeah, that took a couple of years.
Okay.
I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to do rock music because Big When the Gig, we started out as like a replacement-y, Husker Du kind of thing. And we never really, we always maintained a fairly, aggressive, whatever sound, like a lot of loud guitars and loud vocals. And so when I got to New York, I started listening to electronic music and different other types of music. And I was like, I just don't want to do that anymore. And it took me a while to figure out what was the natural fit. I tried doing like folk music for a while, like just me and acoustic guitar. And And that didn't seem to really fit until I started putting some drum loops underneath it. And then, in 99, I recorded what became the first Burnside Project album, but I didn't even think of it as, it was just me,
Oh, okay.
It was me with some guitars and some samplers and, some stuff that I'd kind of figured out in terms of making beats and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and so that was more like a demo, really. It's the Red album. It was officially released in 2000, but I made, I don't know, whatever you had to make, 1,000 copies on CD, and I basically used them just to send to record labels and booking people and stuff like that.
And is that record? Is that how you guys, or how you got signed to Bar None Records? Was through that tape or album?
Exactly. So Bar None liked it. They also happened to be local, which was nice because they are in Hoboken. And so we started, there were a couple of labels that responded, which felt really exciting. And it was cool. It was like Grand Royale, the Beastie Boys label. They really dug it. And so it was like, all right, cool. So, but Bar None was the most, I don't know, they seemed to show the most interest, and they were very patient. So we would just record songs and send them to him, to Glenn Morrow at Bar None. And, he would like, this is cool. What else you got? So, a couple of years later, we finally agreed. They were like, okay, we're going to put out a record. So we did that. And that was, I would say, the first like real album I've put out in terms of like, and this is 10 years after My Social Commentary, the Big Mother Gig album. Because it was 2003 where suddenly it was like, okay, there's a publicist. The song is going to be on the radio. It's going to be in record stores all over the country. It's before, I think maybe iTunes was happening then, but it was all about, pushing product out into the world and, touring and, playing showcases and CMJ and all of these kinds of things. So it was a fun couple of years with Burnside Project.
That's exciting. And did that all kind of happen quickly once you signed the deal? I mean, it sounds like a lot was going on. You could put a record out, your radio play, and you're touring. And was that all like, it sounds like they were able to help you quite a bit as far as that goes.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Bar None saw something that they liked, and they were able to turn it into something that would have a certain amount of ears on it, we had one song that got licensed to be the theme song to a TV show. So that became kind of a big deal. It was huge. It led to us signing a licensing deal with Sony. So we ended up going to Japan for a couple of weeks. Wow. And like, that was incredible. I mean, that was a whole other animal, because we were on this indie label, Bar None, and then suddenly we were on a major label. And we weren't at all prepared. And I don't think we really understood the magnitude of what was happening, because we got off the airplane and there were limos picking us up at Tokyo Airport. And we're like kind of looking at each other like, what? Don't they know who we are? Like, we're just a bunch of indie kids. Like, I think they got the wrong idea.
That's cool, though. That must have been, I mean, I can imagine that must have been a huge, I mean, and just the next level, right? When you get to Japan and it's like, okay, now there's limos, like this is really exciting.
And it's different too, because, Sony owns that country. And so
that's interesting. I've never been, but I didn't even have any idea that.
Oh yeah. So Sony basically decides this is going to be, a hit. And so they make it a hit. So we were getting airplay on all like the top 40 radio stations. So by the time we got there, we played a handful of shows and they were sold out and people were singing along. It was the first time I've ever had that experience of like looking out and seeing mouths moving along with mine. It was pretty incredible.
Wow. Is that where the saying comes, big in Japan? You hear that?
Yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing. Cool. I was big in Japan for a little bit. I don't think it lasted long, but
well, you put out four records with Burnside Project. I mean, that's
we did.
There. I mean, for sure. And during that time, was that when you started doing the remixes? Because with Pocket, that's mainly just remixes, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I was always very, what's the word? I always wanted to be working. So when Burnside would have some downtime, I still was like interested in the software, learning all of these recording. I was using Reason and then Ableton for a while and kind of learning these things. And, just kind of for fun, I took this Joanna Newsom song that had just kind of come out called Bridges and Balloons. And I just dragged it in my system and started putting beats underneath it. And I just threw it on our website. And then like Brooklyn Vegan liked it and they reposted it. And then Stereo Gum posted it. And then suddenly it was like, oh, maybe I should do this some more. So I started doing it just kind of like on my own. And then people started asking me to do their, remixes for them. And that was fun. It was totally different than being, Burnside Project had grown to being a band. I had these two core members, Paul and Gerald, who are still, super close friends of mine. But then Pocket was almost like going back to being solo again. It was like just me. And so I did a lot of remixes. I don't even know how many, maybe 20 or 30 remixes, and then decided to make an album of Pocket and wanted to keep the same idea. So I basically made music beds, sort of in that same style, the kind of electronic rhythms with, indie guitar. And then I just sent them around, and I got some of my like biggest influences musically to agree to sing on them. So that was another thing that was pretty incredible. We had Steve Kilby from the Church, and Robin Hitchcock sang on a song, and Tanya Donnelly from, Belly and the Breeders. And so it was primarily it was almost like one of those things where I felt like at the end, I think I can retire now. like I sort of crossed all the boxes off.
Right. How were you able to get these artists on the songs? Was it just reaching out and, hey, would you like to?
It was, I don't know. I think some of it was in the timing. This was 20. I think I started the album in 2009 or so, where you could just go to like a band like the Church, go to their website and just pull their email off and just like write them a note, and Steve Kilby would answer it. So that's kind of how it happened. I reached out on my own, and I got a few big names, and then it became easier because then it was like, hey, I'm doing this project with Robin Hitchcock and Steve Kilby. And, and then it was like, oh, okay.
You had some credibility.
And, so I started putting out them as singles on my own. And then this label out of Florida said they wanted to put them out. So they started putting them out. And then this label in the UK said, we want to put it all out. So it was out on 3 different labels.
Wow.
That album. Yeah. So it finally came out officially, in 2012 on this label out of the UK, like a dance label.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you were doing all these things kind of simultaneously, like Pocket and Burnside Project. And then when did
Burnside Project kind of stopped because, again, so my wife and I, we'd been in New York for 10 years, because we got there in 96. And so by 2006, it was like, okay, I think it's time to do something new. And so I got a job in Portland, Oregon. So that was the end of Burnside Project. We around 2006, we played our last show. Things had been kind of winding down. Like, I think we all kind of saw, with a band, with any band, you get moments where you have this momentum and then you kind of plateau. And that's a key moment. Like, what happens when you plateau? And for us, we had gone through that at least twice, once in 2003 when the Networks album came out, and then a year later when we got signed to Sony, we would have these moments and then you would kind of plateau. And then we kind of plateaued around 2005 and didn't seem to have any more momentum after that. So, and everyone was doing different things and getting more involved in other things. I was doing Pocket. So it just kind of started slowly fizzling out. And then it was totally amicable. I think we all just kind of decided, I'm going to move to Portland and you guys are going to stay here. And, maybe we'll finish that. Oh, so you said 4 records. That last record we had started in 2004 and we just tinkered with it for like 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because that came out in 2016. That was still like, wow, like 11 years later.
Exactly. So those recordings, like all those vocals and guitars were recorded when we were in, New York or Hoboken together in our little studio there. But, we would try mixing it and then get kind of frustrated with each other and then just say, well, let's forget about it. A year would go by or 2 years and we'd try it again. And then finally we're like, okay, it's time. And so that's why there's that last record, even though it's 2016, that music is all from the original. Yeah.
Older.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. What was when did you guys decide like, hey, it's been a while. Let's finish this. Let's finish what we had started.
Yeah, I'm not sure, honestly, because I'm in touch with those guys. So we talk about all kinds of stuff. And it's just kind of one of those things that has always been hanging, in the back, like it was unfinished business that we all knew at someday was going to have to get taken care of. And it just kind of came down to when did we all have, because I would guess, I don't remember, but I would guess one of us said, let's do it. And I would say from that moment, it probably took another 1.5 to 2 years before we actually finished it. It's not a priority. We all, like me and Gerald, we both have kids and it's like, Paul was working for the New York Mets, like everyone had different things that was really more important to them. So it was like only when there was absolutely nothing else happening were we going to devote any time to that.
Okay. And when you put it out, was there any plan to play shows at that point, or was it just like, let's just get this thing out? Because
it was like, let's get it out. Burnside Project, one of the things that was really difficult about that band was there was so many electronics involved. And we're really rock musicians, and it's not really in our blood to like, we're not, gearheads when it comes to like electronics. So whenever we played shows, there was always this feeling that something is going to go wrong because there's all these different devices that are sort of like trying to do their part. Yeah. And we're playing guitar along with those devices. And there were times where like really weird stuff would happen on stage and suddenly we're like, oh wait, we just repeated a verse on accident. Or, the bass is pumping so loud that it actually caused the DAT player to skip. And now we don't know where we're at in the song. So it was always nerve wracking. And when we put out the record in 2016, it was like, I don't know. I don't even know how we would do this kind of music today. Like the technology is all different. Like we'd have to take a class on how to, how to be an electronic band.
Yeah, how to play your own songs. That's interesting. Exactly. Was the finishing that Burnside Project record kind of what inspired you to get Big Mother Gig back together? Like it sounds like it was like kind of around the same time that you decided.
Yeah, I guess it did kind of. It did kind of happen around the same time. I don't know. I think, I had a child in 2013. And I think something about the process of becoming a dad really sort of drove me to look back in the rear view to both of those projects, Burnside and Big Mother Gig, because by that point, both of them were way in the past. And, the Big Mother Gig really started out as a book idea that I wanted to write. I had this idea that, we were this band that, because the funny thing about the moment we broke up, I told these guys, bands don't get signed, bands in Milwaukee don't get record deals. So if we want any success, we have to move to a city like New York or LA. So when I did move in 96, lo and behold, in 1997, all the bands in Milwaukee got record deals.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, you had the Promise Ring, you had Citizen King, you had this band Bender and the Buzzhorn, and all of these bands got signed to Atlantic. And, it was the funniest thing. It's like my timing was Well, that's my timing. It's exactly what it's. So anyway, I thought that was a really funny story, and I thought, well, I'm going to write a book about that, about how if we this sort of like classic missing the opportunity kind of story. Mm-hmm. So I started talking to these bandmates, and some of these relationships did not leave on good terms. So there was a little bit of reconciliation, but I was like, I want to just tell the story of this band. And so we all started talking and doing, back then, which was really novel, doing Zoom calls, in like 2014 or something, 2015. And then, of course, at some point during the book research process, someone goes, well, when are we going to play a show? And at the time I was like, oh no, that's not what this is, guys. Like, this isn't, but then I thought, well, actually that would be a really good ending to the book. So that was really the genesis of it, was let's book a show, let's record a few songs, have this big reunion, and then that'll be the end of the book. Mm-hmm. And I got bit by the rock and roll bug. And so I still haven't finished the book because I decided to keep doing it.
The story's not over yet, right?
The story's not over yet. Exactly.
That's cool. So, yeah. Wow. So, well, now you put out this is the third record since the return of
sort of. Yeah. I mean, we did the EP, which was the sort of the original, it's hard to say original, the final version of Big Mother Gig in 1996. Mm-hmm. That lineup, we recorded an EP called Almost Primed, and that was what we did the reunion show was around that. That was in 2017. Then when I got to LA, those guys, again, just like last time, everyone had lives to get back to, they have jobs and families. And, I was still, I have my own music company in addition to this. So I have a lot of flexibility and freedom. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to keep doing this. And they all gave me their blessing. So I found some new people, new members here in LA that are all originally from the Midwest and all, same age. And they all grew up listening to the Replacements. And, it was really magical. So we recorded the second recording, No More Questions, which includes some of those songs from the EP. And then Gusto, which is the new record, the one that just came out. Yeah. So I guess you're right. It is three.
Yeah. Wow. Well, are you also still doing Mondragor?
No. That was honestly, that was a nom de plume that I used for stuff that was neither Burnside Project nor Big Mother Gig. And so, those are just sort of little solo records that I put out that, they are what they are. They're just little,
I just wanted to touch on that because I know it's part of your story.
Yeah, it is part of the story. They would be called Richard Jankovich if that name had any kind of ring to it whatsoever.
Okay. Wow. Well, where were you when this whole coronavirus pandemic hit? Because this album just came out. Obviously, it must have been worked on during the course of the last year.
Well, coronavirus single-handedly delayed my album launch. That's basically what happened. So Gusto was recorded in 2019. It was written early in the year and then recorded and mixed and mastered by December. So
wow.
In January of 2020, we played a record label showcase and we played the album and we had, a couple labels come out and see us and we're really excited. And then we started making plans to release the first single and then coronavirus happened.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, oh, well, we don't really know what to do. It seems like a bad time to drop an album. So we put out a few singles last year just to kind of put things out into the world, but we just kind of sat on it. The world had far more important things to worry about than our little band. So, we kind of knew, and it wasn't just coronavirus. There was so much happening last year with politics and with social justice movements that it just seemed like there just wasn't room for us. And so we kind of respectfully just took a back seat until things got a little bit more, I don't even know what the right word is, not normal, but just seemed like people had room for new bands instead of all of the other stuff.
Sure.
So yeah, so we made plans to release it, and it just came out in April. We started releasing singles in February.
Okay. And then the record just came out. Is there, I mean, the world's kind of opening up again a little bit. Is there a plan to take this thing on the road, or what do you have planned for Big Mother gig?
Yes, so we will be touring. We have tour dates coming up in September through October. We have not announced them yet because there's still some dots or I's to dot and T's to cross, but we're very excited. We're going to be playing some incredible venues. We're hitting as much of the country as we possibly can.
Wow, that's exciting. When was the last time you did a tour? Has it been a while? I mean, obviously it's been over a year, but I mean, prior to that.
I mean, the last thing we did something close to a tour, we did a handful of dates with the Gin Blossoms.
Oh, wow.
In 2018. Yeah. They did like 3 or 4 West Coast dates.
Mm-hmm.
And so we joined them on that. And that was the last time we played, multiple nights in a row. Also, Big Mother gig is, we're all dads in our 40s, and some of us maybe even more. And it's like, to hit the road, it's a big thing. It's a big ask.
Sure.
And this one coming up in the fall is worth it. We signed with a booking agent, and so we're really excited about getting out there and playing to the people. We really miss being on stage.
Mm-hmm.
I know I do.
Yeah. It must be hard to juggle. I mean, I would assume, I have 2 kids of my own, like being able to like leave for extensive period of time and tour the country. Is the family coming along with you on these tours? Like, I mean, it sounds like this is just you guys and back to the roots, having fun again.
Yeah, basically, we're not the Foo Fighters where we're gonna, cart an RV filled with wives and children or anything. It's like, we're still playing, 200 cap clubs. So the finances aren't really there to justify bringing all your family around. Plus,
Sure.
We actually planned it for September. I know I wanted September because then my kid's back in school,
right?
And it's actually less disruptive for me to be gone. My daughter's 8 now, mm-hmm. And it would have been, our guitar player is in a different boat. His kid is like 2, maybe,
wow.
Or maybe a little less. So it's a much bigger deal for him
mm-hmm.
to leave. But for me and our drummer, he also has a kid who's 8 or 9. So for us, it's a little bit easier. They're in school. They're taking care of themselves a little bit more. And mm-hmm. It's easier for us to leave for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, for sure. I can't imagine leaving like a 2-year-old, like,
sorry
to your wife, like, good luck. You know what I mean?
I would say the good thing about them. Yeah. The good thing about them is, his wife is also a performer. So she has to go hit the road at times too. So it's just kind of part of their, it's your turn to stay home.
I was going to say, it's going to come back to him, right?
Exactly.
Well, what have you been up to like over the course of the year? I mean, you had a record complete, then it's just dropping singles. Were you guys working on new music? Are you working on Pocket at all? Or like, what did you have going on over the course of this whole pandemic?
So, yeah, I'm writing a lot. I have been writing a lot of music, and some of those songs feel like they're going to be a new Big Mother Gig album. Some of them feel like they might be a new Burnside Project album. I honestly don't know. It's wherever the songs land is where they're going to end up. I don't think I would ever do another Pocket album at this point. It just seems like I'm so far behind the technology of remixing and I just don't really feel a desire to relearn all of those tools,
Mm-hmm.
Also, I will say when I was doing Pocket, like I would do a Radiohead remix and everyone was interested. It was like kind of a novel thing
mm-hmm.
back then for, to hear, Anthony and the Johnsons get remixed or whatever the case, or Cat Power, whatever. Mm-hmm. Today, it's just not that interesting to hear. Everyone's getting remixed all the time. It's like that we probably have an overabundance of remixes. And so it doesn't feel like somewhere where I would necessarily want to put my time or effort into.
It's a different world when it comes to remixes too. I mean, you weren't remixing top 40 songs. I mean, you're remixing of Montreal. Like, you know, how many, you know what I mean? Like it is, but it's, I mean, I love the remix you did of Gamma Ray. That's so cool.
Thanks. Yeah, that was fun. And I put Jay Retard in it because he had covered Gamma Ray. And so I took his version and Beck's, and it's almost like a mashup remix because you can hear him. You can hear him singing along with Beck on it.
Beck. Okay. Yeah, that's really cool.
I did that also with the Radiohead one because they were covering a Bjork song. And it was, you know, they had done like a live from their studio recording thing. And I just kind of captured it. And so it's just Tom on piano. So it's really easy to work with from a remixing perspective. But then I layered on Bjork, the original Bjork vocal along with it. So they're actually duetting on the song together, which is fun.
Oh, that's rad. I haven't heard that one. Oh, Unravel is the one that you did.
Yeah. Some of those are hard to find now because I don't know where they ended up. A lot of them were unofficial. So, you know, I'm probably ruffled some feathers putting some of those out, but I also know Radiohead put it on their website at one point. So they must've liked it enough to actually
that's
mention it.
Yeah. Do you remember seeing that? Like, how did you find out it was on their website? That's huge.
I mean, you find those things out.
Of course. Yeah.
When that happens, it makes its way to you. So yeah.
That's crazy to know that Tom York listened to that remix and liked it enough to say, hey, let's throw it up on the website. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, Richard, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I really appreciate it.
No, it's my pleasure. You covered a lot of ground, man. That's like a 25-year career you just got through.
Well, I thank you so much for chatting 25 years with me.
I appreciate the desire to even talk to someone like me.
No, man, I'm a fan. I'm a fan, and I love your story. It's really fascinating. And I do have one more question before I let you go. Do you have any advice for aspiring artists?
The only thing I would tell someone who's getting started in music or whatever your art form is just don't. People sometimes get hung up on when you're an artist. Like, when do you become an artist? You know, it's not when you make money. It's not when you put something into the world. It's not when you sell out Madison Square Garden. You become an artist the day you decide you want to make art. And that's the most important thing. And during your career, if you're fortunate enough to have a long career making art or music, there's going to be times where people are interested. And there's going to be times where people aren't. And that's just the nature of it. And that applies to everybody, you know, I mean, except for the lucky 1%. But for those of us who are kind of working musicians or working artists, some of your stuff is going to be really impactful and people are going to connect with it. Some of it people aren't. And that's okay. That's just part of the game. That's part of the journey.